There is a moment in every royal family when the mask slips, when all the carefully arranged photographs, the coordinated outfits, the practiced smiles, and the perfectly worded palace statements can no longer hide what is really happening behind those ancient walls. The British royal family has had many of those moments over the decades. Some were quiet, some shook the entire world. But the moment that is quietly building right now, the question of what happens to Camilla when William finally takes the throne, may be the most consequential one in a generation. Because at its center is a single word. One word that Camilla has spent 50 years fighting for, suffering for, and waiting for. That word is Queen. And the question being whispered in royal circles, in newspaper offices, and in living rooms across Britain is this: how much longer does she get to keep it? To understand why this matters so deeply, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the monarchy, not the beginning of Charles's reign. You have to go back to a young woman named Camilla Shand who walked into a party in London in 1970 and met a prince who would change the entire course of her life. She was 23 years old. He was 22. By all accounts, the connection between them was immediate. They were both passionate about horses, hunting, and the kind of dry humor that makes people feel like they belong to a private club. Charles was charmed by her from the very first conversation. He later told friends she was unlike any woman he had ever met, real, funny, completely unimpressed by his title. But Charles was in the Royal Navy, and the demands of royal duty pulled him away. The relationship faded before it could fully form. Camilla moved on and married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973. Charles eventually married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, a wedding watched by 700 million people around the world. It was the fairy tale of the century. A beautiful young woman in a cloud of ivory silk marrying her prince. The world fell in love with Diana almost immediately. She was warm, funny, magnetic, and utterly captivating. She wore her vulnerability like a crown. People felt like they knew her. What the world did not know, not yet, was that the old feeling between Charles and Camilla had never really died. Through the 1980s, as Diana struggled with the pressures of royal life, as she battled loneliness and isolation inside a marriage that was colder than it appeared, Charles and Camilla had quietly resumed their relationship. By the time Diana herself gave her now legendary 1995 BBC interview, sitting in front of a camera with bruised dark eyeshadow and absolute composure and saying, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The affair had been going on for years. The world finally knew the truth, and the world was furious. Camilla became, almost overnight, the most hated woman in Britain. She was the villain of the story. She was the one who had stolen the fairy tale. She was the one who had made Diana cry. The hatred directed at Camilla during those years was extraordinary in its intensity. She could not appear in public without being shouted at. She was pelted with bread rolls in a supermarket. The tabloids treated her with open contempt. Radio hosts mocked her. Comedians built entire careers on jokes at her expense. She retreated from public life almost entirely, rarely appearing anywhere, living quietly in the country. Charles and Diana's divorce was finalized in 1996. Diana died in a car crash in Paris in August 1997, and the grief that followed was unlike anything Britain had ever seen. Millions of flowers were laid outside Buckingham Palace. The entire country seemed to mourn together. And for Camilla, already the public villain, Diana's death made her position even more precarious. She became, in the public imagination, the woman who had driven Diana to unhappiness. And yet she stayed. She stayed by Charles's side through all of it. She did not disappear. She did not walk away. She quietly, methodically, patiently worked to rebuild her reputation. She appeared at more public engagements. She let herself be photographed with Charles. She supported his charities. She smiled through the cold looks and the whispered comments. Royal watchers began to notice that she was actually rather good at the job. She was warm with ordinary people. She had a sharp, natural wit. She did not put on airs. She seemed genuinely comfortable talking to anyone from any background, which is rarer in royal circles than you might imagine. Charles and Camilla married on April 9, 2005 in a civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. It was deliberately understated. There was no grand church, no fairy tale dress, no massive crowds lining the streets. The public reaction was muted rather than hostile, which, given everything that had come before, was almost a victory. Queen Elizabeth II did not attend the ceremony itself, though she hosted a reception for them afterward. Even that gesture from the Queen was meaningful. It was her quiet way of saying, "This is real and I accept it." After the marriage, Camilla was given the title of Duchess of Cornwall. The palace was careful not to call her Princess of Wales, a title that still carried Diana's name and memory and would have caused an uproar. They were careful with everything. Every word, every title, every public appearance was calibrated to manage public opinion. The strategy, on the whole, worked. Slowly, year by year, public opinion shifted. A 2022 poll showed that a majority of British people now had a positive view of Camilla, a dramatic turnaround from the near-universal hostility of the 1990s. Then came September 8, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II, aged 96, passed away at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, surrounded by her family. The nation stopped. It was one of those moments where the whole world seemed to hold its breath at once. She had been on the throne for 70 years. She was the only monarch most living British people had ever known. Her death changed everything. Charles became king the instant she drew her last breath, and Camilla, in that same instant, became queen consort. The palace initially used the title Queen Consort to be careful, to make clear that Camilla was not the sovereign, to avoid any suggestion of confusion with the memory of Queen Elizabeth. But that consort qualification was always going to be temporary. It was a diplomatic cushion, not a permanent title. And sure enough, as the months passed, the palace quietly stopped using it. By the time of Charles's coronation on May 6, 2023, the decision had been made. Camilla would be crowned alongside her husband, not as queen consort, simply as queen. The coronation edition of the Bible read, "To commemorate the coronation of their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla." No consort qualification, no asterisk, no caveat, just queen. AOL. The ceremony itself, held at Westminster Abbey in London, was watched by tens of millions around the world. Camilla sat beside her husband as the Archbishop of Canterbury placed a crown on her head. She was 75 years old. She had waited 53 years for this moment, navigated scandals that would have broken almost anyone, survived the most intense public hatred directed at a private woman in modern British history, and she had come out the other side wearing a crown. Whatever anyone thought of how she got there, the achievement itself was almost staggering. Royal author Tina Brown, speaking to NPR in 2023, described how the public had come to see Camilla as a very hardworking, very gracious, humorous, unpretentious woman, actually, who has definitely improved Charles' life and has really transformed him into being an unapologetically happy man. The list. It seemed finally like Camilla had arrived. The story was complete. After everything, the affair, the hatred, the decades of patience, she was queen, full stop. Except it was not full stop, because here is the thing about royal titles. They are not gifts. They are not permanent. They do not belong to the person who holds them, not really. They belong to the crown itself, and the crown passes from one person to the next. And when it passes, every title attached to it shifts accordingly. What Camilla holds right now is not a title she owns. It is a title she holds by virtue of being married to the reigning monarch. The moment that changes, the moment King Charles is no longer on the throne, the title goes with him. The traditional and most likely title for Camilla, upon the accession of King William V, is Queen Dowager. The term applies to the widow of a king and is a well-established form of address in royal protocol. It acknowledges the former queen consort's enduring status within the royal hierarchy while distinguishing her from the new monarch's consort, who, in William's case, would be Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Royal Central. Queen Dowager. Two words that most people in Britain today have never even had reason to think about. The last queen styled as Queen Dowager was Queen Adelaide, the wife of King William IV, who used the title in 1837 after her husband passed away and Queen Victoria ascended the throne. That is nearly 200 years ago. The title is so old and so unused that it feels almost medieval. And yet, according to every royal expert, every constitutional lawyer, and every historian of the British monarchy, it is the title that waits for Camilla on the other side of Charles's reign. AOL. She will not retain the Queen Camilla title if she is alive to see William succeed Charles. Instead, she will be Queen Dowager, as the widow of the departed king. William's wife, Catherine, will step into the role of queen. She will be Queen Catherine, a title she has been preparing for her entire adult life, by all accounts. And there will, in that moment of transition, be two women in public life with royal queen-adjacent titles, the new Queen Catherine and the former Queen Camilla, now reduced to Queen Dowager. Royal Insider. The matter will ultimately fall to King William. The historically consistent and constitutionally appropriate designation for Camilla would be Queen Dowager, though this, too, is not automatically assigned. William will have to make a decision, and here is where the story becomes genuinely complicated, because the relationship between William and Camilla has never been simple. It has never been warm. And in recent years, with Charles battling cancer, with William edging ever closer to the throne, with power visibly shifting inside the royal family, it has reportedly become something much worse than cold. Royal Central. To understand the tension between William and Camilla, you have to understand what William carries. He is the son of Diana. He grew up watching his mother cry. He grew up knowing, in the way that children always know even when adults try to hide things, that something was deeply wrong inside his parents' marriage. He was 15 years old when Diana gave that BBC interview. He was 15 when the whole world learned about 3 of us in this marriage. He was only 15 when his mother told the world she had been lonely and lost inside the palace. And he was just shy of his 16th birthday when his parents' divorce was finalized. In Prince Harry's 2023 memoir, Spare, Harry wrote that both he and William begged their father not to marry Camilla, worried she would become a wicked stepmother. Harry also accused Camilla of leaking private conversations to the media to polish her own public image. These are serious accusations, and they come from inside the family. But even setting Harry's claims aside, even looking only at what has been reported by royal correspondents, by palace insiders, by the people who watch this family professionally, the picture is consistent. William and Camilla have always been polite in public. Underneath the politeness, there is something that looks very much like unresolved grief and unresolved anger. Fox News. Radar Online has reported that William and Camilla are at war over reports that Camilla is not pushing Charles hard enough to rest while recovering from his cancer. William has been urging his father to ease off and genuinely take a step back to focus on his health, but each time he brings it up, it seems to trigger tension because Camilla is seen as encouraging Charles to keep pushing forward with his public duties. It's becoming a recurring point of conflict between them, a source said. Stylcaster. This is not a minor domestic disagreement. This is a conflict about power. Camilla, according to multiple sources, loves being queen. Reports from Us Weekly indicate that Camilla wants Charles to hold onto the reins for as long as possible, as she loves her responsibilities and has wanted to be queen her whole life, and doesn't want to let it go so fast. And who could blame her? After everything she went through to get here, the idea of stepping back, of becoming dowager, of being the former queen, of watching Catherine step into her place, must be difficult to contemplate. Yahoo! But William is watching. William is preparing. And by every account, William is not nearly as patient as his father has been when it comes to Camilla's influence. According to insiders, William isn't nearly as measured as Kate and has had words with Camilla over it in the past. He is, the source warned, not afraid of breaking protocol to put Camilla in her place. Internews Group. That is an extraordinary thing for anyone inside the palace to say. Breaking protocol, putting Camilla in her place. These are not the words of a family at peace. These are the words of a family where a very serious power struggle is quietly, tensely playing itself out, and where the outcome of that struggle will determine, among many other things, whether the word queen stays attached to Camilla's name. Because here is the thing that makes this story more than just royal gossip. What public role, if any, Camilla might continue to fulfill as a widow is uncertain. A queen dowager holds no constitutional function. She would not sit on committees. She would not attend state banquets as a matter of right. She would not have the same access to royal resources, to Clarence House, to the structures of power that she has built her life around. Her future residence will also be subject to arrangements made by King William. At present, Camilla and King Charles reside at Clarence House, but it remains unclear whether she would retain that residence or be moved to a separate household. Royal Central. Royal Central. Everything, every single thing that Camilla has built in the years since her marriage to Charles is subject to William's goodwill. And the reports coming out of the palace suggest that goodwill is not something William is distributing freely right now. What happens next is not yet written. Charles is still king. Camilla is still queen. The transition has not happened and nobody can say when it will, but the conversations are happening. The preparations are being made. And at the center of all of it is a question that everyone in the palace knows the answer to, even if nobody wants to say it out loud. The day William becomes king is the day Camilla stops being queen. When a royal title disappears, it does not vanish all at once. It fades, the way light fades at the end of a long day, slowly then completely. And the people watching from the inside, the courtiers and private secretaries and royal correspondents who have spent their careers studying this family, know exactly where that fading begins. It begins not with a formal announcement. It begins with a shift in the room, with who stands where at a ceremony, with whose name appears first in a press release, with who gets the better seat, the longer introduction, the warmer welcome from a crowd. Power inside the British royal family has always worked this way, in silences and signals, in protocol and precedence, in the endless careful choreography of who matters most. And right now, the choreography is changing. The tension that has been building between Prince William and Queen Camilla did not appear from nowhere. It has roots that go back decades, and it has been growing steadily more visible in recent years as the reality of Charles's health situation has made the question of succession feel less abstract and more immediate. In 2024, King Charles was diagnosed with cancer. The palace confirmed the news but gave deliberately few details. Charles reduced his public duties for a period, then, to the relief of most people inside and outside the palace, resumed them with what appeared to be considerable determination. He was not going to let cancer define his reign. He was going to keep going. But the diagnosis changed something. It changed the atmosphere inside the palace. It changed how quickly William's team began preparing for the eventual transition. And it changed how the press started writing about the future, not as some distant hypothetical, but as something that could arrive at any time. Journalists who cover the royal family began asking more directly about succession planning. What would happen to Camilla? What role would she play in William's court? Would he allow her to remain at Clarence House? Would he keep her involved in royal duties? And the answers that came back from palace insiders were, at best, ambiguous. Sources told Radar Online that the palace is quietly preparing William to step up, fast as concern about King Charles's health grows. A senior courtier recently said that the illusion of perfect health is collapsing. AOL. Inside that atmosphere of quiet urgency, the relationship between William and Camilla was becoming harder to manage. The disagreements that had always existed between them, about pace, about influence, about what the monarchy should look like in the future, began to surface more openly. And in June 2026, they surfaced very publicly indeed. A simmering power struggle between Queen Camilla and the future king broke into the open at the wedding of Peter Phillips and NHS nurse Harriet Spurling in Gloucestershire. Ahead of the wedding, reports suggested tension was already building over whether Harriet Spurling should be allowed to wear a tiara from the royal collection. According to Closer magazine, Queen Camilla's team blocked the request, arguing that protocol meant Peter Phillips' bride should not be dipping into the family vault. International Business Times. A tiara? On the surface, this sounds like exactly the kind of trivial, absurd controversy that people roll their eyes at when they think about royal family drama. Who cares about a tiara? But in the world of the British monarchy, a tiara is never just a tiara. It is a symbol of access, of favor, of belonging, and the question of who gets to borrow what from the royal collection is, in fact, a question about who holds power over the things that matter to this family. Camilla said no. William, reportedly, said she should have been allowed to say yes. An insider quoted by the magazine says Prince William was furious that Queen Camilla effectively blocked Harriet and Peter from access to the royals' jewelry collection. William was said to have wanted his cousin and close friend to at least have the option of a family piece, only for Camilla to flat-out object. International Business Times. The row was reportedly intense enough to become a heated talking point in the run-up to the ceremony. Guests cited in the reports suggested the atmosphere at the wedding reflected those tensions. One insider claimed, "You could cut the tension between William and Camilla with a knife," while adding that both remained cordial throughout the event and barely acknowledged each other. BTS Times. That last detail is striking. Cordial but barely acknowledging each other. This is a family event, a wedding, and the two most senior royals in the room, the future king and the current queen, were managing to be polite while essentially not speaking. That is not a minor social awkwardness. That is a Cold War playing out in slow motion in front of everyone who had eyes to see it. Royal commentators have frequently portrayed William as a modernizing figure focused on reform and long-term planning, while Camilla has been associated with preserving continuity and supporting King Charles's priorities. And this is where the ideological fault line runs. It is not just about personal history, about Diana, about the affair, about what William carries from his childhood. It is also about two genuinely different visions of what the monarchy should be. Camilla, who fought for decades to earn her place inside the system, naturally wants to protect the system. William, who will inherit that system and knows it must adapt to survive, wants to change it. And the specific thing he wants to change, the pace at which Charles pushes himself, the influence Camilla has over that pace, the question of what role she will play in his eventual reign, puts them directly at odds. BTS times. Meanwhile, there is another dimension to this story that has received less attention, but is arguably just as important. Because the tension inside the royal family is not just between William and Camilla, it is also between Camilla and Catherine. The tension between Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Queen Camilla has reportedly gone from frosty to almost unworkable, with insiders saying the two senior royals can barely tolerate sharing the same space. What began as a quiet clash of styles and priorities is now described as an increasingly bitter feud playing out just as Prince William edges closer to the throne, and King Charles continues to manage his health. Behind the palace facade of unity, the dynamic between the two most prominent royal women has become a power struggle over influence, image, and the future of the monarchy itself. AOL. The specifics of this feud are, as with most palace intrigue, difficult to verify precisely, but the outline is consistent across multiple sources. Camilla, who spent decades fighting to be taken seriously as a royal, now finds herself watching Catherine younger, more popular, recovered from her own cancer battle, and returned to public life with what commentators have described as extraordinary poise, gradually assume the role of the monarchy's most visible and beloved female figure. That is a shift in the spotlight that Camilla did not ask for and reportedly does not welcome. For much of 3 years, sources say, Camilla privately worried she would be perpetually outshone by Kate, whose popularity has only grown since her cancer remission was announced in January 2025. Internews Group. Kate Middleton kicked off 2026 under renewed strain as tensions within the royal family sharpened, with insiders telling OK. That open warfare has erupted between the Princess of Wales and Queen Camilla, which they say has become almost impossible to contain. The latest flare-up followed months of murmurs about a breakdown in their relations, which palace aides say dates back to a moment during the state visit of Donald Trump and his wife Melania to Britain, when Camilla appeared to shoo Kate away during a conversation with Melania. AOL. Whether that specific incident happened exactly as described is impossible to know from the outside. What is clear is that multiple sources, speaking independently to multiple outlets, are describing the same underlying dynamic, a relationship between two women who are each trying to secure their place in a hierarchy that is in the process of changing, and who have very different visions of where that hierarchy is headed. Camilla wants things to stay as they are for as long as possible. Catherine, who has spent her entire adult life preparing to be queen, is ready for the transition that will bring her that role. As one source told Radar Online, the clash between the two women is due to a power struggle. Camilla feels sidelined, while Kate's growing confidence and visibility are unsettling her. Both are aware that the balance of power is shifting, and neither is prepared to step back quietly. AOL. And there is something almost poignant in that if you look at it from a certain angle. Camilla spent decades being told she was not good enough, not acceptable enough, not loved enough by the public. She worked methodically and quietly to prove all of that wrong. She earned her crown. She became genuinely respected. And now, just as she has settled into the role she always wanted, the ground is shifting under her feet again. The next generation is coming. The next queen is ready. And there is nothing she can do to stop it. What makes Camilla's position so particularly complicated is the question of what exactly William would decide about her title and her role if and when he becomes king. This is not a decision that has already been made. It is a decision that, according to every expert who has weighed in on the subject, remains entirely at William's discretion. Historical precedent offers a useful guide. Following the death of King George VI in 1952, his consort, Queen Elizabeth, adopted the style Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother to avoid confusion with her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II. While she was technically a Queen Dowager, the title Queen Mother was more commonly used to reflect her dual role as both the widow of a king and the mother of the sovereign. Royal Central. But Camilla cannot follow that path. Since she was Charles's stepson, the Queen Mother title doesn't apply. William is her stepson, not her son. She cannot claim the emotional and constitutional logic that made Queen Mother work for Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. She would be Queen Dowager, and that title carries none of the warmth, none of the public affection, none of the sense of beloved continuity that Queen Mother did. Queen Dowager is a technical designation. It is the title of someone who used to be queen and no longer is. The list. There is also the possibility that Camilla could choose to use a lesser title, such as Princess Dowager, or revert to her previous title, Duchess of Cornwall. Each option carries its own implications, its own signal about how much, or how little, she will remain part of the public royal life. And all of those options are, in the end, subject to what William decides. He is the one who will become king. He is the one whose goodwill she will depend on. And the reports coming from inside the palace suggest that goodwill is something he has not yet fully extended. Royal Central. One royal photographer told the Express, "In my opinion, the feeling I get is that William is trying to take over the monarchy, and in reality, Charles is saying, 'I'm the king, not you.'" Stylecaster. This is the family dynamic in microcosm. Charles, still on the throne and still very much intending to remain there, pushing back against what he perceives as William's impatience. Camilla, aligned with Charles, wanting things to stay as they are. William, watching from Kensington Palace, preparing for a future that he knows is coming, and making, quietly, the calculations that a future king has to make about who will be part of that future and who will not. The British public, for the most part, does not yet fully grasp how significant this question is. The title Queen Dowager sounds like a footnote, a minor procedural detail in the grand narrative of royal succession. But it is not a footnote. It is the difference between Camilla being part of the official royal family in a meaningful public sense, and Camilla being a private individual who used to be queen and now lives in whatever residence William chooses to allocate to her. It is the difference between a front-row seat at history and a polite distance from it. The stakes could not be higher. For Camilla, who has given the last 50 years of her life to this family, this institution, this crown, the idea of being quietly moved to one side must be almost unbearable to contemplate. And yet contemplating it is exactly what she may need to do, because the clock is ticking, the power is shifting. And Prince William, for all his public warmth and carefully managed image, is a man who knows exactly what he wants the monarchy to look like when it is finally his to shape. Every story about the British royal family eventually arrives at the same question. Not who wears the crown, not who sits on the throne, but who, in the quiet moments when the cameras are put away and the formal ceremonies are over, actually holds the power. And in the story of Camilla and William, that question is no longer theoretical. It is arriving, step by step, decision by decision, title by careful title. And what it will look like when it arrives has the potential to reshape the public face of the British monarchy for decades to come. To understand where this story is heading, you have to understand something about William himself. He has been preparing to be king for his entire life. Not in the anxious, reluctant way that his father spent decades preparing, Charles, who waited and waited for a throne that never seemed to come, who grew old in the role of heir, who sometimes seemed to disappear under the weight of the waiting. William is different. He is organized, focused, deliberate. People who know him describe someone who thinks carefully about every decision, who plans far ahead, who is not easily moved by emotion when it comes to the mechanics of the institution he will one day lead. And one of the decisions he will need to make, possibly sooner than anyone would like to acknowledge, is what exactly Camilla's place in his monarchy will be. The reports that have emerged from palace sources in the past 18 months paint a consistent picture. William has concerns about Camilla's influence over Charles. He worries that she is, whether consciously or not, encouraging his father to keep pushing himself publicly rather than resting as his doctors would prefer. He is frustrated by what he sees as Camilla protecting her own position at the expense of Charles's health. And he is reportedly making no secret of this frustration inside the family, even if publicly the mask of unity holds. One source told Radar Online. Once Charles agreed to give up control to William, distraught Camilla clutched her pearls, collapsed from grief, and exclaimed, "Don't do this to me." Another insider told the site that she wants to prolong her stay as queen, but William is getting in the way. Camilla is all about the power trip, the source said. She knows that her husband had been waiting to be king for a very long time, and quite frankly, she had also been waiting to be queen. Stylecaster. These are strong words, and they come from inside the family circle. Whether they are entirely accurate is impossible to say. Royal reporting always operates in a fog of competing agendas. Sources who speak to journalists usually have reasons of their own for speaking, and those reasons are not always transparent. But the consistency of the reporting, the same basic story told in the same basic way by multiple sources to multiple outlets over many months, is difficult to dismiss entirely. Something is happening, something is changing. And at the center of it is the question of what it means for Camilla when the transition comes. As the monarchy prepares in time for the transition from King Charles III to his heir, the Prince of Wales, questions of royal protocol and constitutional formality inevitably begin to surface. Among them, one matter of subtle yet significant consequence awaits a decision by the future King William V. What title will Queen Camilla bear should she outlive her husband? The answer lies in a historical designation not often in public discourse, but deeply embedded in the customs of monarchy, Queen Dowager. Royal Central. In the reign of William V, that title will, by then, belong to Catherine, Princess of Wales, upon her husband's accession. In such a configuration, there could feasibly be two queens in public life, the Queen Consort and the Queen Dowager. Royal Central. Two queens, that is the reality that awaits. And managing that reality, making sure the public knows exactly who is who, which queen holds power and which is simply honored, will be one of the first great challenges of William's reign. History offers no perfectly clean precedent. The closest comparison is Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who navigated 50 years as the widow of a king with what most people regarded as extraordinary grace. She remained beloved until her death at the age of 101. She was a fixture of royal life for half a century after her husband died. She found a way to remain relevant, to remain loved, to remain present, without ever threatening or overshadowing her daughter, the Queen. But the circumstances then were entirely different. The most recent example where a spouse outlived the monarch was Queen Elizabeth's late mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who was married to King George VI and was known as the Queen Mother throughout Elizabeth's reign. The Queen Mother outlived King George, who died in 1952 by 50 years. And crucially, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon was the mother of Queen Elizabeth II. Her position within the family was unassailable not just because of protocol, but because of love, a mother and her daughter. There was no competition, no power struggle, no history of resentment. There was just a family, complicated as all families are, but bound together by something genuine. AOL. Camilla does not have that. William is not her son. He does not owe her the kind of emotional loyalty that Elizabeth II owed her mother. The relationship between them has been shaped by grief and complexity, and by multiple accounts, real ongoing tension. William isn't nearly as measured as Kate and has had words with Camilla over it in the past, and is not afraid of breaking protocol to put Camilla in her place. These are the words of a man who, whatever respect he shows publicly, is not prepared to simply accommodate Camilla indefinitely out of sentiment. Internews Group. And Camilla knows it. There is every reason to believe, given her extraordinary instincts for political survival, the same instincts that got her through 50 years of public hatred and brought her to Westminster Abbey with a crown on her head, that she is watching all of this very carefully and thinking very carefully about what it means. She is 77 years old. She has spent a long time playing the long game inside a family that rewards patience and punishes impatience. She knows better than almost anyone that the ground in royal life can shift without warning. What then are her options? What can Camilla actually do to protect her position, her legacy, and her title in the years that remain? The first option is simply to be indispensable, to continue doing the job she does well, the public engagements, the charitable work, the quiet diplomatic grace that she has become genuinely good at, and to make herself so valued, so obviously useful to the monarchy, that William would think twice about diminishing her role. This is not a guaranteed strategy. William is not someone who will be emotionally managed into a position he does not want to take. But it is not nothing, either. If Camilla remains genuinely popular with the public, and current polling suggests she is, then moving against her too overtly would have a political cost that William might prefer to avoid. The second option is Charles himself. As long as Charles is on the throne, Camilla's position is secure. She is queen. She has access and authority and the protection of her husband's role. And Charles, whatever his health challenges, is clearly not planning to go anywhere quietly. He is continuing to work. He is continuing to appear publicly. He is, by every account, still very much the king, and still very much capable of ensuring that his wife is treated with the dignity and respect that her title demands. Reports indicate Camilla wants Charles to hold onto the reins for as long as possible, since she loves her responsibilities and doesn't want to let it go so fast. There is something deeply human in that. Whatever political calculations are involved, there is also simply a woman who loves her husband and does not want to face the world without him. The two things are not mutually exclusive. Yahoo! The third option, perhaps the most interesting one, is Catherine. Because here is the paradox at the heart of this story. Camilla and Catherine are, in theory, on the same side. They are both invested in the dignity and stability of the monarchy. They both want it to be strong, respected, and relevant. Their feud, such as it is about the present, about who holds influence right now, about who sits where at which ceremony. But about the future, their interests may be more aligned than either appears to recognize. A smooth transition of power, one that honors what Camilla has contributed. That gives her a graceful exit into a respected elder statesperson role. And that allows Catherine to step into the role of queen without drama or controversy, would serve everyone. Another source adds, Camilla worked hard to establish herself after years of criticism, and she doesn't like the idea of being overshadowed. Kate's return has been polished, professional, and very queenly. It's obvious she's positioning herself for the future, and that's making Camilla uneasy. AOL. But uneasy is not the same as defeated. And Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman who survived the 1990s, who survived Diana's death and the hatred that followed, who survived decades of tabloid ridicule and came out the other side holding a crown, is not someone who becomes defeated easily. She has an instinct for survival that is, frankly, remarkable. She has bent when she needed to bend and held firm when she needed to hold firm. She has known when to be visible and when to disappear. She has known when to charm and when to simply endure. The question that nobody inside the palace has answered publicly, and that William himself has not addressed, is what exactly he envisions for Camilla's role in his reign. Does he see her as a valued elder member of the family who will be given a comfortable and respected retirement? Or does he see her as a complication, a reminder of a difficult past, an influence that needs to be managed, a title that needs to be downsized as quickly and cleanly as possible? The question of Camilla's future title may seem, on the surface, a matter of etiquette, but it represents something more substantial, a symbolic moment in the monarchy. It is a moment that will tell the world something important about what kind of King William intends to be. If he treats Camilla with generosity and grace, if he finds a way to honor what she has contributed without pretending the complications don't exist, then he will send a signal about the kind of monarchy he wants to build. One that can hold complexity, one that can acknowledge difficult history without being destroyed by it. One that is, in the truest sense, modern. Royal Central. If he does not, if the transition is handled badly, if Camilla feels humiliated or diminished, if the tabloids get wind of a genuine palace war and run with it, then the damage will not be confined to Camilla alone. It will touch the monarchy itself, and William knows this better than anyone. There is something else worth saying, and it is something that tends to get lost in the noise of palace intrigue and title debates. Behind all the protocol and politics and historical precedent, there are real people. Camilla is a woman in her late 70s who has spent most of her adult life navigating one of the most brutal public gauntlets in modern history. She has been loved, and she has been hated. She has been called names in public spaces and celebrated in Westminster Abbey. She has lost friendships, and she has made enemies, and she has, somehow, managed to hold her head up through all of it. Whatever one thinks about the choices she made decades ago, the woman who stands today as Queen of England has earned her place through sheer, sustained endurance. And William is a man who watched his mother suffer, who carried that grief through his childhood and his adolescence and his young adulthood, and who carries it still, who became, in many ways, a different kind of royal because of what he witnessed, more guarded, more deliberate, more aware of what the institution can do to the people inside it. He has his own wounds. They have not disappeared simply because he has grown into a composed and capable future king. The collision of those two stories, Camilla's hard-won crown and William's quiet, enduring grief, is what makes this more than a story about titles. It is a story about what we owe each other across the gaps that history opens up between people. It is a story about whether an institution as ancient and strange and uniquely human as the British monarchy can find a way to be fair to everyone inside it, even to people whose histories are complicated, whose relationships are difficult, whose very presence in the same room is the product of choices that hurt other people. The answer, when it comes, will say something important not just about Camilla or William, but about the monarchy itself, about what it is for, about who it serves, about whether it can hold in the same careful hands both dignity and honesty, both the weight of the past and the possibility of something better. The announcement that William will one day make, about Camilla's title, her role, her place in the family he will lead, has not yet been made. It will come when the time comes, in the manner of all royal decisions, carefully worded and precisely timed. But everyone who is paying attention already knows what it will say, and Camilla, more than anyone, has been paying very close attention. The crown she wears today is hers. Tomorrow belongs to someone else. And the space between those two facts, that narrow, tense, historically loaded space, is where her story is playing out right now, in real time, behind the walls that have always kept the real story hidden from the rest of the world. Until now,